There are some serial killers. What makes them frightening isn't only the number of people they've killed. What's truly frightening is how perfectly they can imitate a human while being a monster. They live in the same neighborhood, go to the same job, and hide inside ordinary life. Joachim Kroll was exactly one of them. Quiet, faded into the background, unnoticed. Someone no one looked at twice. But behind that ordinary image, one of West Germany's most disturbing murder files was growing. And what made this story even more horrifying was that he didn't only kill. It was that he exploited the victim's body even after death. Joachim Kroll's childhood didn't begin with a single dramatic break, but he came from a small, quiet, repressed life. He grew up in a crowded family. He was one of those displaced after the war, trying to cling to life again. From the outside, he looked like an ordinary child tossed around by fate. But some lives start quietly, continue quietly, and then one day, an indescribable darkness emerges from within. And that's what happened with Joachim Kroll. After his mother's death, something changed. And soon it would become clear that this change wasn't just a personal collapse. What made Joachim Kroll dangerous wasn't grand spectacle or complex plans. On the contrary, he was quiet, he was fast, and he waited for opportunity. He caught his victims off guard, strangled them quickly, and then he took the crime to a far darker dimension. In this file, death wasn't the end. Joachim Kroll engaged in sexual acts involving the victims' bodies after death. He removed parts of the body and took them with him. Then he cooked the parts he had cut and consumed them. This was no longer only serial murder. There was a depravity here that continued even after death. Most of the victims were women and young girls. Files that surfaced over years. Different ages, different places, different methods. At first glance, these murders and missing person reports looked too scattered to be tied to one person. As the file expanded, not only the murders but also misdirected investigations came to light. Other people were blamed. Some couldn't live with the accusation and took their own lives. Meanwhile, the real perpetrator went on living for years. Maybe that was Kroll's greatest advantage. He left behind a fear that didn't fit a single profile, spread across years and seeming disconnected. And that's exactly why he could remain invisible for so long. In the end, what changed everything wasn't a major operation, but a small detail. 4-year-old Marion Ketter had disappeared. That's why the police were going door to door. Meanwhile, a neighbor's drain in the building was clogged. After it was fixed, the answer to why was it clogged was terrifyingly simple. Intestines. That single word led the police to Kroll's door. And what they encountered inside changed the rest of the case forever. The child's body was found in the home, in a dismembered condition. Some parts had been kept, and some had been prepared for cooking. And the drain pipe had been clogged by physical evidence of the crime. After that, there was no point in denying it. Kroll was arrested, and from that moment on, the darkness began to unfold. Joachim Kroll finally spoke. He described not only the last murder, but other murders he claimed to have committed over the years. He went backward in time, from one name to the next, from one city to another. In total, he confessed to 14 murders. But what he described wasn't heavy only in terms of numbers. What made him frightening wasn't only the 14 victims, but how he could remain calm enough to sit down to a meal after killing. He said he first killed the victims and then committed sexual acts involving the bodies. Then he cut flesh from the body, cooked it, and consumed it. And he talked about it as if it were an everyday habit. Even stranger, he claimed he did it to save on grocery expenses, as if everything that happened wasn't a horrific chain of crimes, but a malfunctioning instinct. and Joachim Kroll believed some things could simply be fixed. Joachim Kroll's case wasn't a quick closure. It took a long time. It moved heavily, and the darkness of the file surfaced once again in the courtroom with its full weight. In the end, he was convicted and received a life sentence. But even so, it didn't feel like the entire file was closed, because not everything he confessed became equally clear. Some files were fully uncovered, others remained in the fog. A monster had been found, but not every trace he left behind could be fully resolved. In 1991, Kroll died of a heart attack while in prison. But even on the day he died, his file didn't truly end. What makes the Joachim Kroll file chilling isn't only the number of murders. What makes this file different is how easily fear could fit inside an ordinary person. A quiet man, an unremarkable neighbor, and behind the curtain, a violence that didn't stop even after killing. Maybe this is exactly the darkest part of this story. Sometimes the monster doesn't arrive screaming. Sometimes it simply lives in the next apartment.